Three bells for the afterlife.
My Uncle Frank was a kind rogue of those who didn't believe in ghosts or anything like that. I don't blame him. He, in his 60 years old, had been educated at the time when, if the parents of a kid listening to him talk about ghosts and stuff, so he was lying, and the best way to win telling lies were a good lashing. So it was very interesting when one night at a family gathering he told me an experience that had happened when he was a child.
I want you to know that I tell you this only to you. I don't want anyone in the family think I'm crazy.
After him understand that his secret would be safe with me, Uncle Frank sat on the sofa and he served another glass of beer to accompany his story. We were in a room of his house. It was a holiday, the birthday of his sister, my aunt Claudine. Actually, they weren't my uncles. Were related, yes, but the family bonds was so far. When they explained me the family tree, I gave up to understand it. For me and my family, they were our relatives. His huge house, very old building, had several rooms, so it was not hard to get away from the rivalry. At this time, we were both alone, in a self-contained room in total confidence.
You know that in this town the people always count stories of goblins and ghosts.
Even so, of this house, always told the story of employees' children disappear without a trace. If I had heard that story, what say happened at time of Uncle Francis' great-grandfather. He said and continued his narrative.
Once, as a child, something happened that I cannot understand. I tell you to tell me what was.
I saw in the eyes of that man the need to know the truth of a hidden chapter of his life. Blatantly lying, I told him I would discover that tormented him.
I was 12.
Recommenced to tell his story, he said.
There was a party, as now. It was Grandma's Margaret's birthday.
In those days, birthdays lasted 3 days. Was that all? The people had plenty food and drink. The men sat in the halls and the women cooked for all visitors. Children could be neither in the hall or in the kitchen. They should play in the garden.
At that time, my parents dressed me with a new suit. White shirt, pants above the knees, high stockings, and shoes of Sunday. I was furious. Because I was happy running around barefoot and in the countryside. That outfit was like a punishment for me. To be counted, my parents bought me a huge red ball. Being in the yard with other children and everyone made fun of my appearance.
I could not stand much. I fought with everyone and got into the house, looking for peace without asking anyone's permission. I got into the old hall. It was forbidden in my house that I or my sister would play there. In that room were the painting of relatives, the pendulum clock, and the old phonograph. I guess my parents didn't want they broke them. Nobody was in the room, so I started to play, alone with my ball. I stood against the wall where the clock was, and started bouncing my ball against it. I threw the ball to the ground, bounced, hit the wall, and grabbed with my hands, and over and over and over again, he said.
Suddenly, the old clock began to ring. It was 3 p.m. Years later, I hear tell the local priest that 3 o'clock was the hour of the devil and the trolls. But at that time was 3 in the afternoon. Stopped a while, taking my ball with both hands as the clock struck 3 bells. Once the clock stopped ringing, I threw the ball against the ground. The ball struck the bricks floor and loudly. This soared toward the wall and full crossed the wall. I don't lie, by God, the ball was gone, as if it had penetrated through an open door. The wall was intact, and the ball wasn't.
I was a child, was more amazed than fearful. I could hear through the wall like the backbones of the ground, so far away. I walked over to the wall and held out my hand, and I could see almost disbelief how my fingers and then my whole hand disappeared before my eyes, as they went through the wall. Never in my life I had seen something like that, or saw him again. I clearly felt my arm was in a cold place. I could move my fingers inside. When I retired my hand there, it was wrapped in a small greasy and transparent film, like when you rub oil. I went back to get my hand a few times to verify the fact. At that time, something told me to stop. Again, I took the hand off the wall and thought about how to retrieve my ball when I saw that the wall was arched outward, he said.
I didn't have time to react. A horrible hand, nailed as close, came out of the wall and strongly grabbed my wrist. Was cold and viscous, clinging to my little wrist as a snake. Was horrible. I only know that thing wasn't human. I was paralyzed of fear. That thing crawled me silently into the wall. I was so terrified, not crying. Only I managed to defend myself, kicking, pulling, screaming, hitting my little fist. I was trying to wriggle. It had a force superior to mine. It was much higher than a man. I could do nothing. I felt as my whole body was introduced into the wall, in the midst of the deep darkness, where there was no glimmer of light.
I don't know how much time had passed, but I started to feel very light. It was a cold and oppressive feeling. I could hear to all inhuman laughter everywhere, cries, moans and groans of creatures I could not identify. It was very dark, darker than I ever seen. If I opened my eyes, it was as if even I had closed. I wasn't in there. It was like I was floating in the thick and cold liquid. Already, I being older, once I put my hand in an oil barrel. It was a very similar feeling. But I wasn't alone. A part of the voice coming from nowhere, and that terrified me, something else was there with me. It was like if that creatures were swimming around me.
I felt them move me, surround me, growling. It was horrible. In an instant, I felt something round near my face. I touched it, and I knew it was my ball. Trying to catch it, one of those creatures lunged and bit me. I cried very hard to feel those fangs that were embedded in my hand. I picked myself, sobbing. I got in fetal position. It seemed that those creatures were enjoying my pain. I held them seriously laughing. I don't know how long I was there. It seemed centuries. I began to feel an infinite feeling of abandonment, pain squishing in my chest. Have you ever been scared to death? Because I do, and often. But the feeling was different. Not only fear never to return and not see my family again, it was a sensation to disappear, to be alone forever. It was terrible. It's something I never want to ever feel.
At that point, Uncle Frank began to sob. Big tears began to spill down, her wrinkled cheeks shining in his huge nose. He tried to overcome, to regain integrity, but couldn't. While waiting, I saw a pair of elongated and triangular scars on the back of his right hand. Had always thought they were the result of a fight.
I never knew what happened next.
Suddenly, resumed his narrative, he said,
Slowly, I opened my eyes and was lying on the floor of the room next to the clock. Walked like drunk. Was already dark. The clock showed 7 in the evening. No one had noticed my absence. When I went with my parents, they scolded me. I had those marks in my hand, and I had returned without my bag and soaked with oil from head to toe. My costume was a shame. I don't need to say that I got a good spanking. Day 2, I had a foot with some bread. While my mother cleaned, reproached me, I noticed I was holding a paper with the other hand. What's this?
Taking out an old paper from his wallet, Uncle Frank told me he kept it with him since then. It was a very old wrinkled paper. On one side was printed the program of the parish masses of the people, and the date was May 16 of 1868. It was definitely printed with kind of odd letters. On the back, a drawing. A child seemed to have drawn a cow and 3 characters with gold. A woman and 2 children.
My parents wanted at all costs me to tell them who had hit me and stole my ball. I never dared to tell anything. My dad bought me a bag and put it on a dresser in the room. If I confessed, he would give me the bag. I never said anything, and the bag stood there many years. That's the story, so tell me where I was.
I had to be honest to him and say that I couldn't answer. He took it in stride.
When someone tells me that it's my birthday, I laugh because I think that 4 hours of my life left me.
He said, and I promised him that I would try to investigate.
Now I'm not afraid to die at my age, but I'm afraid to think that if I die, maybe I come back to that side again.
The night progressed, and when the party ended, and along with my family, I hastened to say goodbye to relatives. Once again, showing me myself that I can't with my genius, I decided to leave the house of my uncle for the long way, crossing the old hall. It was dark and in order. No one was there for the party. It was clean and tidy, as always. Going through the darkness, I stood against the wall. Next was the old clock, which still worked. I looked at the wall a while, until I realized that the clock was checking 2:55 a.m. I had not drunk that much, but I felt as if the floor was inclined to that side of the room. I dared not stay there until they were 3 o'clock.